Come blast off in my time machine. Third eye feeling like an Evazine. Blast off, blast off, blast off, blast off. Come blast off in my time machine. Third eye feeling like an Evazine. Blast off, blast off, blast off, blast off.
Blast off on another episode of Hero Paranormal Podcast, broadcasting from the base at La Madre Mountain, just south of Area 51. My name is Ryan, the original outlaw of the airwaves, bringing you an epic episode tonight. Remarkable guest today, MG Stevens, and myself have kept in touch for some time, and both have similar views as to the types of entities people may be experiencing in this reality, or at least an affinity of conversation pertaining to figuring out the motives, the rationale, etc. of these beings or entities. MG Stevens is a fellow podcaster with a popular show, the Boogeyman Chronicles podcast, which I have had the good grace of connection with and luck to have been interviewed with MG Stevens on her podcast, the Boogeyman Chronicles, episode 5, I believe. She is an author, researcher, podcaster extraordinaire. MG Stevens, welcome to the Hero Paranormal Podcast.
I'm fine. Thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it. It was really an honor because I really enjoyed, and a lot of people also enjoyed your episode on my podcast. So when you asked me, I was like, oh my God, yeah.
That's awesome. Heck yes. And it's, you have experienced high strangeness, which is so refreshing to have someone who has experienced something similar, something very real. And I don't think people know the half of it, right?
Yeah. I mean, I've had a lifetime of paranormal activity. It's just a kind of a way of life, really, for me. It's not like I was, just kind of living this sort of normal, quiet life, and then all of a sudden I had an encounter. It's been going on since I was about 2 or 3.
Yeah. And would you say these entities are something that are very real? And what is your opinion on how these entities interact with humans? And start from a place you're comfortable with.
How they interact with humans? I think that we live in a world where I think we've strayed a lot from indigenous beliefs because as soon as the Christian-y sort of colonizing belief came in that, none of this exists and it's just God and the devil and there's no other, spirits and that kind of thing. There's no other entities. Once we were told that, I think we really lost sight of the fact that we live in possibly a very interdimensional world. And there are a lot of, I think, when we say the veil is thin in this particular area or whatnot, I think we have those thin veiled areas of paranormal activity and high strangeness everywhere. And I think certain people are just wired to see through that veil. And so I think I don't know, for whatever reason, some people just attract this kind of thing. And so entities, they can range from demonic to, grandma that passed away, you know what I mean? And,
sure.
Or angelic, and so it's different for everybody. I mean, I listen, like you, I'm sure, to paranormal podcasts constantly, and it's just, it just runs the gamut. You know what I mean? I think we live in a world where these things do exist, and we are constantly told that they're not. And the one thing I've kind of gone along in my life where it's like people say, oh, indigenous people are more spiritual. And it's like, I don't think they're more spiritual. I just think they never had that sort of cut off, that thing where it was like, when you're a kid, you believe in Santa and this and that. And then when you get to a certain age, nope, no more fantasy, no more, otherworldly things going on. And so adults are always telling you, that doesn't exist, it doesn't exist. So in indigenous cultures, they don't really have that. They don't have that cutoff point. You know what I mean? Where these sort of things don't exist, because in indigenous culture, they always exist. And so they're always, either warned or they're always in touch with those things. And so I don't think they're more spiritual. I just think that there wasn't that sort of thing where we were told that they don't exist. So I think that, certain cultures are more in tune and more in touch with the paranormal and otherworldly things. And unfortunately, non-indigenous cultures are not so in touch. And so I think we have a lot of people out there that kind of panic when it comes to the paranormal. I've talked to a lot of people who, just cannot believe it. They're like, am I crazy? And I'm like, no, you really did see this thing, and they kept, yeah, I did see it, or I did hear it, or I did feel it. And when I talk to indigenous people, they don't have that, am I crazy? They just know, like, no, I saw this thing, So it hits the paranormal and internal encounters and, those sorts of things, they hit everyone differently.
I agree 100%. And, it is kind of like when you get to a certain age, you have that magic stolen from you in many cultures. The floor is yours. Where do you want to get started? We can go into maybe some of your experiences from a paranormal perspective or other things you've encountered through either research or personal experience, UFOs, or just good stories, whatever you like.
Okay. Well, I grew up neurodivergent. As you know, I'm autistic and I have ADHD. And I am in the process of writing a book about how or why, or maybe just starting the conversation as to why a lot of neurodivergent people tend to have more UFO encounters. I just interviewed Kathleen Martin, who is the niece of Betty and Barney Hill. And I asked her point blank, I said, is there a link between race, culture, religion, age, gender, neurodivergence? And she said at least 80% of the people who claim to be abducted or experiencers are neurodivergent, with my mother and me included. So I'm very interested in that, and I'm very interested in the culture of, apparently, a lot of native indigenous people and Irish people tend to be more abducted than other folks, other cultures. So that's also interesting to me. But yeah, I always felt weird and different growing up, and I always knew there was something different about me. And I grew up in a house where the paranormal was an everyday thing, and I didn't have a real sounding board, even though my mother was a really well-known psychic in that area that we lived in. We really didn't talk about it, and that's what people like, wait a minute, your mom was a psychic and you didn't really talk about it? I said, no, because it was something she did, and I just was kind of living my life over here playing with Barbies, and, it was just a thing. And I remember my very first encounter, I was, from what I can remember, my mom always said, she was like, you were always like talking to something, which freaked her out. She was like, every time I would go to the door, I would always hear you babbling to something, and it was just like you were talking with a purpose, though. It wasn't like baby babble. It was, it was like you were talking to something and responding to it, which creeped me out. But I remember as a little baby, I don't know how old I was exactly, but I remember I was old enough to stand up in my crib, and I remember I had this very strange encounter where I looked up and I saw something floating above the crib, and I remember pointing at it. But yet I remember in that moment kind of almost being split, and I was myself. The thing floating was me, and I remember looking down at me in the crib, and it was so weird. To this day I have no idea what that is. And it happened again about a year or two later. It was Easter, and I was outside, and I was very cranky. I probably needed a nap, and I was not having it. My mom and my sister were trying to like, hey, like Easter eggs and fun, and I was like, no. And I was just really cranky, and the same thing happened. I still remember looking up and being really terrified by something floating. But yet I remember looking down, being the thing floating, looking down at the scene. I was so perplexed by this because I remembered it like, it was yesterday. I talked to Paul Eno, who is a demonologist. He's a very well-versed, experienced paranormal investigator. He's been doing this, 50 plus years. And he worked with Ed and Lorraine Warren, and he worked on many cases. And I said, what the heck was that? He said it could have been a shifting identity point. And the thing with Paul and his son Ben is that they have experienced so much paranormal activity out of the realm of the sort of typical, the typical UFO, the typical haunting. They've had so many interesting encounters that they've had to kind of come up with their own glossary of terms just to kind of put a name to something. And so he said it sounds like a shifting identity point where, and he told me, this is his words, in the multiverse, you just kind of became two entities or whatever, and you saw yourself and the other side saw you, and you just kind of, became like, broken up in a way. And I still don't really, my brain, I can't wrap around that, but he's very smart, and I kind of listen to what he, I kind of trust what he experienced so much, so I really trust what he says. So maybe, hopefully it was just something like that. I don't know, because when I think about those particular incidences, I'm like, what if that happens again, and I'm an adult now, and it freaks me out. So I get kind of creeped out by that. But yeah, those were my two first encounters. I have no idea still. I mean, I kind of hope that Paul knows what he's, talking about when it comes to that. But I at the same time, I'm kind of like, what if that happens again? So those two encounters were probably the ones that really shift me to my core, because they're not typical, like, oh, I saw a ghost or I saw a UFO or something. It was the very fabric of my being, I guess, being split in some way. I don't, you know what I mean? Again, I don't really know how to put it into words other than what Paul said. So, those were my first two encounters. And then I remember, after that, I remember just being very ultra sensitive. And, here I am, I'm young, I'm very young. I'm a new human being on this planet, and I'm experiencing everything for the first time. And I'm also neurodivergent, so I'm seeing the world differently than other people, neurotypicals do, So I'm looking at everything very differently, and I'm having these weird encounters. And all my life I've wondered two things. Is it me? Am I crazy? Or everyone goes through this, right? Everyone sees these things, they feel these things, right? Like, right? And so many times I thought I'm probably crazy. But as I got older and I started learning about the paranormal world and the spiritual realm, it then, became apparent to me. It was like, oh, you're one of these people. You're, for lack of a better word, psychic or intuitive or what have you. You know what I mean? But I started to kind of clue in as to who I was, what I was, and then it started to make a little bit more sense. And it started to kind of, once you realize you're not crazy and it's a thing, this is a thing people go through, it becomes a little less scary. And so, from then on, it was just seeing things, feeling things. I was ultra sensitive. I felt like an exposed nerve in some way. And so I remember wherever I went, I don't care if it was an office building, I don't care if it was an old home, I don't care if it was a new home, I don't care if it was a plot of land, wherever I was, if there was something there, again, like we talked about earlier, the thin, the thin veil. Sometimes people can, I guess you could call it, just pick up on those sort of areas where the veil is really thinner than in some places. And if there was something there, whether it be demon, ghost, spirit, some sort of elemental, whatever it was, I don't know. But I would always feel a presence of something, if someone died or whatever. I just knew these things, and I would tell my family, like, oh, someone died in that house, or someone died on that land, or, in my own backyard. I remember I lived in a very rural part of the South, and when I was there, I was in a very new part of town. This town was so rural, we didn't even have a grocery store or a hospital. And I remember playing in the backyard, and I remember just being watched from, like, I had a backyard, and then we had a canal, and then there was like an undeveloped plot of land, and it was basically just forest. And I remember being stared at by something so just so intensely that I literally had to go inside. It was just like, there's something out there watching me, and it's creeping me out. And I would come inside and play, and I could feel stuff on the property. My mother sensed a lot of things on that property as well. Her friends, because she had a lot of friends developing their ESP, so they would come over and they would sense a lot of stuff on that property. So it was just a constant everyday thing. I would go in I had a big walk-in closet. I would go in there and play, and something would be in there with me. I could feel it. At night, I couldn't sleep because something was there, would not let me sleep. Whatever it was, I don't know. It would always really kind of become more, I guess, active at night.
Sure.
So yeah, that was terrifying. But yeah, my most terrifying encounters, I think, when it came to everyday haunting type stuff, was my father's second wife. She had this was my first stepmother. My father's been married 6 times, and one of those. And so my first stepmother had a condo in this particular part of town, and we used to go there on the weekends. My dad, her and my dad were married. They lived there, but I would visit on the weekends, and it was the most terrifying place. I don't know what was there, but I do know that it didn't like me, and it made its presence known to me all the time. Every single time I went there, all weekend long, if I spent the week, like let's say a couple of weeks there in the summer, every day, every night, this thing would just torment me. And I still don't know today, to this day, I don't know what that was. I don't know if it was demonic. It kind of felt very evil, but not exactly demonic. But it just felt very like it took a lot of pleasure in torturing me. It just loved it. It was like kind of like a mean older sibling, just constantly and unrelenting. It would not stop. There was no rest. There was no, break. I was just constantly tormented, and it was a terrifying place to be. It was really hard for me because as a kid, I was really happy to see my dad and my stepmom, and I was happy to spend time with them and away from, all the craziness of, the sort of this, going to school and all of that. It was a nice little escape for me, but yet I was constantly tormented by something I couldn't see, and so I developed, kind of like what I kind of term as a paranormal PTSD. And I had to sleep with the lights on, and I, I had to sleep with all the doors open in case I had to run out and run into my parents' room. It was just, it was, really terrifying. And that's another thing that I'm very passionate about, is getting people to talk about their encounters so that they can find some sort of solace, realizing, okay, you're not crazy, you did experience something. And yes, there is such a thing as paranormal PTSD. I talk to people to this day who, have had 1 encounter, 2 encounters, a lifetime of encounters. It doesn't matter. I've talked to so many people who still at the age of 70 something are, still sleeping with the lights on because of what they've been through. They have to sleep with, the doors open or closed. The lights have to be on. Or they can't sleep alone. They have to have someone in the next room or someone in the room with them. I mean, it's or they have to have like the TV on fuzz or something. It's really interesting how people want to poo-poo paranormal encounters, but this is a real thing. People will go through this. It has the same effect as a say a combat vet or someone who has been through a really terrifying encounter. Paranormal PTSD is nothing to laugh at. This is something that's very real, and I've talked to many people that suffer with it, including myself,
Yeah, no, I think it's a very real thing too, especially, given the fact of some of the involvement with the paranormal and what people are seeing. And so that's the question. And I'm with you. Why isn't this accepted by the media as of yet? Although it is getting better. a lot better. Why isn't this a bigger story? You know, it seems like experiencers are getting some media time, but there is some military involvement now on via UFOs and stuff with the paranormal on TV. Why do you think it's taking so long for it to get better?
I think it goes back to that being maybe the media was controlled, by a certain kind of voice where it was like the old white dude, saying that, oh, these things don't exist. You know what I mean? I mean, how many, like I just mentioned, indigenous cultures, we don't really have that separation. But as soon as you get older, in non-indigenous cultures, you have people saying that doesn't exist. Santa Claus doesn't exist. UFOs don't exist. Bigfoot don't exist. So you have that constant, pressure to not believe in the paranormal, even as you're experiencing it. I grew up in that kind of world where, I was running, I would get, pushed or something. I would get shoved and I would go and tell, or I would be tormented at night and I would go and tell, run in, to my parents' bedroom, my dad and stepmom is, something just pushed me, something. Oh, come on, you're just imagining it. That doesn't exist. It isn't real. So it's a horrible place to be in, because you feel so unsupported because you're going through something, but the people that should believe you don't. And I think that's just been kind of the voice, all over the media all these years. And I think, too, the military has had a big involvement. I think it really did start with Roswell and, those sort of incidences where, nope, not a UFO, it's a weather balloon. And, I think maybe, maybe the military has had a kind of a sort of a hold on the media and what they put out too. I mean, I've heard a lot of stories where, a group of people saw a UFO and they went to, the local news station, they told them and they went to report it and they got a call from the military saying, you're not going to report this. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? You're not going to report it. And I've heard so many of those stories. So I think maybe some is the military, but I think a lot of people grew up being scared of being laughed at, ostracized, it just was a thing and it just kind of permeated. And, thank God for all the brave souls, because in my day, in the late 70s, early 80s, we didn't have a whole lot about this. You know what I mean? There wasn't websites and books and, all that kind of stuff. I mean, the only sort of paranormal pioneers I had in my day, really, that I knew about were Ed and Lorraine Warren, and they were laughed at for decades. They were considered kooks and, opportunists and scam artists and all kinds of stuff. So, you had those few brave souls that would come out and say, yeah, I have been abducted, or yeah, I have a ghost in my house. And even then, people were just so quick to poo-poo it. And it was really unfortunate because I think more people should have and could have come forward, and we could have started this conversation sooner. We could have been normalizing paranormal encounters and the discussion around them sooner. And, who knows who that could have helped, I mean, I know of a lot of stories where people had paranormal encounters and just took it to their grave. They wouldn't talk about it, and it tormented them. Again, paranormal PTSD, they had nightmares every night about these things that they saw or felt, or something was following them, and they were scared to say anything because they were told that what was going on was not real. Or they tried to tell someone and someone laughed at them, so they clammed up and never talked again. That's really upsetting to me. I don't like it when people are not allowed to at least talk. They're not allowed to at least verbalize, look, I just saw something. I've been going through something. Talking sometimes really does break the spell, or it really does make you just feel better. I don't know how many people out there, if you have something bothering you, sometimes just verbalizing it, it helps it, makes you feel better, makes you feel, more at peace. And so I think the silencing, I think a lot of that has to do with, I know a lot of, heard a lot of stories of scientists who wanted to start studying the paranormal, but their peers or the people above them or whoever, were people at the university that were like, absolutely not. You're not going to study the paranormal. This is ridiculous. People in the military. I mean, how many people are just now like Robert Salas and all the people that he talks to? These people are now coming forward who have been in the service for years and years, and they're now being able to, tell what they know and what they've seen. So I think there's a lot of factors involved when it comes to the silencing of telling or talking about the paranormal. It's terrible. I really, it angers me because it's not fair. And a lot of people, it's doing a huge disservice, really, because there's a lot of people out there that could find a lot of peace or could find, the meaning to their life or, whatever, something.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, it's the silencing of paranormal encounters and the giggle factor. Yes, thankfully, nowadays, it's a lot less, but it's not where I would like it to be. And I know that from, other people's standpoint as well. The whole conversation just needs to be normalized. And I'm hoping that, in the next 5-10 years that we will get to the point where there's no more giggling. We can just openly say, yeah, I've got a ghost in my house, or yeah, I got a demon in my house, or yeah, I saw a UFO, and there's no giggle factor. There's just like, okay, really, wow, cool. And, it becomes commonplace. That's what I hope. And I hope that more people get help for paranormal PTSD, because I know a lot of people that suffer with it that are trying to find help, and they can't, other than paranormal, like investigative groups, they don't really have a lot of help out there, just full-on therapy, counseling. I know a lot of people that had a paranormal encounter and tried to talk to a regular therapist about it, and the therapist pretty much told them they were crazy, told them that's a hallucination. So I'm hoping, like you and like everyone else out there, that, this sort of thing becomes normalized, really.
Absolutely. And, I agree 100%. There are a lot, there should be more care in the field and not as quick judgment, but specialists and analysts from, as we mentioned, some government agencies have delved into locations of high strangeness, whether it's areas like Dulce, New Mexico, or purported UFO areas or underground base locations, which are usually in proximity of Native American lands. Why do you think the government is getting so involved in the study of some of these locations? And what do you think the connection between the unidentified aerial phenomena and Native American lore might be?
Well, geez, I don't know. That's like 10 different conversations right there. When it comes to the government, I've had relatives that work for the government, and they always told me, never trust the American government. They're always up to no good.
Yeah,
I was raised hearing that. So, as well as me, these sorts of things are usually black budget type, projects that even the president doesn't even know about. You know what I mean? And how many times did, Jimmy Carter and Bill Clinton kind of inquire about these kinds of things and be like, what is going on? And we're told, don't think about it, don't worry about it. Or we're told only maybe what they wanted to hear or something, I think there's different branches within the government that could be doing stuff like this. And why they're being allowed to investigate, I don't know. I think that's kind of strange because, you would think that whatever black budget something or other would say, don't be concerned with this. I don't know. As far as the UAPs and the sort of high strangeness and near, reservations and areas where natives either lived or have lived or are living, that is something that I would like to know as well. There are stories going back, hundreds of years of indigenous people in America, and even South America, Central America, talking about star people and talking about our brothers from the sky and stuff like that. So, what makes us think that, these, aliens, whatever you want to call them, what makes us think that they haven't been visiting Earth all this time? You know what I mean? So it just, I believe they've been visiting this whole time. If there is such a thing, why would they have, not visited until just the 40s? That's ridiculous. I mean, I'm very interested in the encounters, like before Roswell, before all of that, where we had, excuse me, we had encounters back in the 1800s and early 1900s of, for lack of a better word, spaceships, and people seeing things. I love reading old, like really old newspapers where they have those clippings where it shows, so-and-so was on his farm and then he saw this flying ship, this flying craft or something, So I think I just find it really interesting because, like, again, going back to the indigenous encounters of indigenous people, I was talking to someone the other day about Bigfoots and Sasquatch and stuff, and I said, indigenous people have been telling non-natives about Sasquatch and their encounters with Sasquatch for hundreds of years, literally. And non-natives are just now starting to come around and go, oh, there's such thing as Bigfoot. And we're like, yeah, it's been like that, because every tribe has a different experience with, Sasquatch, and the Tlingit people up in the northwest, their idea, their impression of Bigfoot is, I forgot what they call it, but it's an evil spirit, and they're warned not to go into certain parts of the forest,
right?
Because it'll kidnap you or kill you. They have a lot of missing person cases where they attribute these missing people to this particular Bigfoot type monster. And then Cherokee culture, from what I've been told and what I've grown up with, is that Bigfoots are kind of like this sort of respected brother, we kind of view him from afar. And as long as we keep our distance, he's cool, we're cool, that kind of thing. And we're always sort of, it's more of a benevolent sort of relationship. It's not this sort of evil spirit that, is trying to get us. We respect their space, they respect ours, and that's just kind of how it goes. So every tribe has their own, Bigfoot type creature that they have their own experience, whether good or bad. But, Native people, again, have been telling non-natives, like, yeah, this stuff happens, like, a lot. And, we've been laughed at by non-natives for years. And then all of a sudden, now the non-natives are like, oh, there is such a thing, And again, it's that catching up of, the non-native cultures who have been told these things don't exist. Now they're starting to see, oh, yeah, they do exist. And so they're catching up to, those things, so.
Absolutely. And I think you're absolutely right that the tricksters and other paranormal entities with trickster-like traits, you mentioned the Sasquatch, according to some tribes, are often, at least in cultural and family lore of certain cultures, they are deeply rooted. Why do you think that even though just about every culture has a form or definition of magic, some of them have just been cut off from their past and they just don't believe in a lot of the paranormal, which even when it comes to UFOs?
I think a lot of tribes, as you know, a lot of tribes, some tribes have been very lucky to have been more, say, isolated and not as colonized, whereas other tribes have been completely obliterated. They have had to assimilate into other tribes. There's languages that are no longer that no longer exist because of colonization. So a lot of tribes have been colonized to the point where they, accepted white ways, white culture and religion. They became very Christianized. A lot of my family were very Christianized, and they were very, a little too accepting of white ways because they were promised, hey, look, adopt our ways, and then you can keep your land, you can stay on your land. And that's what they did. And of course, they were backstabbed. So, later on, they lost their land. But, I think what it is that a lot of, there are some there are some tribes who just, I think, weren't allowed, weren't able. They were more, like I said, more colonized. They were more whitewashed, and they were more just accepting of white ways, and that sort of their old way of life, their traditional ways, those will fade away with every generation. And you have to be careful with elders, because when an elder passes away, there goes language, there goes formulas, there goes stories, there goes the our creation stories, myth and lore. A whole library disappears when an elder passes away. And so a lot of tribes, their elders died from disease, and they were left with just not even knowing about their past and about their ways, their traditional ways, and so they assimilated into other tribes. It's just how it is. It's the unfortunate, the unfortunate, result of lots of colonization.
Absolutely it is. And, we've seen it in so many places. And it does seem like the United States has these strange portal areas, a lot of times, as we mentioned, in proximity of Native American land, which sometimes have other strange factors such as shapeshifter lore, cattle mutilations, and military involvement, sometimes, or at least government. What are your thoughts on the government coming in and starting to study, the paranormal in some of these areas?
I think this, you and I discussed Skinwalker Ranch and whatnot. I think it's, whatever they're hoping to gain. I always told a friend who frequents the Skinwalker Ranch, I always told him, I said, I feel that in a few years' time, possibly some faction of the U.S. government is going to maybe take over that land and just kind of kick off whoever is on there, whether it's Brandon Fugel or whoever has that land at that point is just going to be like, okay, it's our land now, go. And they're going to keep anyone off that land. And they're, I've seen it in Sedona and other places. There was, high strangeness in a particular area, and all of a sudden there's this military presence where, and there was campers and hikers were frequenting this land because they were able to, it was parkland. And then all of a sudden all this high strangeness started happening, and before you know it, they've got, rifles in their faces by these, camouflage dressed dudes, and they're like, no, you're not allowed to be on this land, and it kicked them off. Mm-hmm. So there's all kinds of stuff going on. I don't know what they're hoping to gain. Are they hoping to make contact with aliens? What is it? What is going on? Is there such a thing as the Dulce base? Do they have contact with aliens already, and they're hoping to make other contact? What the heck is going on? I really don't know. We can sit here and throw ideas at the wall all day long, but the government coming in and studying this, again, what are they looking for? Are they hoping to find some sort of it's always self-serving. That's my opinion. At the end of the day, it's self-serving. What are they looking for? Are they looking for something to help with military weaponry? Are they trying to find a way to cloak themselves? It's always having to do with war and weapons, and being able to kind of be one up on the enemy in case one arises. And I don't know. It just seems like it's very self-serving if the government's coming in and studying and inquiring and then confiscating land and keeping that land for themselves and hoping to do whatever. Again, I always was told don't trust the American government, and I don't. For many reasons, but yeah, I think at the end of the day, it's just I just have a pessimistic view. I think it's very self-serving. I just think they're up to no good.
Absolutely. And it's so wild doing a podcast from a human perspective. You've had some amazing guests on your podcast, and I know you've had some of the same guests I have. And sometimes after hearing their stories, life changes a little or is impacted. Something, can you tell us something you can't forget that you've heard, any theories or stories from guests, other than myself, of course, of things that have impacted you, whether it's military involvement, places like Roswell or some of these other areas?
Yeah, I mean, as far as military involvement, I mean, let's go to Terry Lovelace and his incident at Devil's Den.
Mm-hmm.
The things that stay with me are when, he and his friend Toby were looking, they had just had their encounter, and they're looking out the tent, and Terry goes, "What are those little kids doing out there?" And Toby is literally crying, saying, "Dude, those aren't little kids. Those aren't little kids." And of course, Terry looks out and sees these little grays milling about, looking around. And then as soon as they get back to the base, the really awful things that they were subjected to, truth serum and hypnosis sessions against their will, and all of this really awful stuff, just because the military thinks they can, and they know they can.
Right.
Things like Deborah Cobble White, who was working with Bud Hopkins, as you know. She told me, it's no secret that she was tormented and her phone's tapped and her house buzzed by black helicopters for at least 2 years or more. So yeah, and even Linda Moulton Howe, I just heard, she was talking about how her phone's been tapped for years.
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't know what the paranoia is, because especially in this day, because they think we're going to sell secrets or something. I mean, what the hell? But it's just interesting how the government is very, very interested in these encounters and the people that have them, and will stop at nothing to intimidate and silence these people.
That's true. And I think you've obviously spoken with a lot of folks who have had these, I think you mentioned some strange, almost Men in Black experiences, kind of going along those lines. What are your thoughts of Area 51? What are your opinions of Area 51? And do you think it's a real thing?
Yeah, I mean, anytime the government is keeping a secret, my dad always told me this. He said, anytime you keep something a secret, it makes people want to know about it more. And they would not be, I mean, I'm sure you've been in that area where it's not just going up to the gate and looking in. You can't even go within a certain mile radius of the place,
Mm-hmm.
Because of the armed guards that are, positioned in certain areas and to warn or shoot to kill. So why, if there's nothing to hide, why all the secrecy? Why all of the, the armed guards and the standoffs and all of these things, that these guards have with people? Why, if there's nothing to hide? So there's something going on. What exactly, I don't know. I can't say. I've never seen it. But Bob Lazar seems to be pretty trustworthy. I believe him. And I don't know. It's always that thing. If there's nothing to hide, why are you hiding?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? If there's no secrets, then why are you being so secretive? What's the deal with that? It's just, to me, it's just a lot of, suspiciousness. I mean, again, why are you hiding if there's nothing to hide? So it's just, I think that their actions speak for themselves. If there's, people, guarding the place within a certain mile radius, you can't even get up to the gate. I mean, what does that tell you? They're trying to protect something. They're trying to keep something secret. They're trying to hide something. They don't want you to know, and they're going to do everything they can to keep you out. I mean, how many people maybe have they shot on site or something? You know what I mean? And you never know about those things. I hate to sound like a conspiracy theorist, something like a fringy kind of person, but I mean that, I just don't I don't trust the government and anything they say, because there's always so much secrecy around everything they do, and they're, again, self-serving. There's just so much going on there. I mean, if the Tic Tac video hadn't been leaked, would we even have, these discussions right now? You know what
Sure.
I mean?
Yeah. And that's the thing, it's just so wild. And you've spoken with folks and done some research, I'm sure, into Roswell. And that's a perfect example. What are your thoughts of what may or may not have taken place back then? I'm not an expert on the subject. It's probably just looked at it from a research perspective, but I don't know. I'm trying to form an opinion from a research perspective, and it does seem like the government involvement back then was very shifty, back and forth, and a lot of disinformation. What are your thoughts of the whole Roswell incident?
Well, I think this was one of the first encounters that the government really, or the military really did have, like, this was like the first big thing. And they had no dress rehearsal. So they were just kind of like, oh, shoot, what do we do? What do we do with this? And so they were kind of at a place where they were like, should we tell the public or should we not tell the public? And I think this goes back to, and I've heard a lot of people say this, Orson Welles, War of the Worlds, afraid of mass hysteria, afraid of chaos, afraid of people, committing suicide and, losing their minds and just, running amok in the streets. And, how many 50s B movie UFO movies have we seen where the UFO, you see the saucers and people are running to and fro and they're screaming and, they're running, the cars are running into each other, you know what I mean? So that, I think that shows you right there where people's minds were back then. They were, or the military at least, they were just scared, like, look, people are going to lose their crap. We cannot tell them that there's aliens out there because, there's going to be mass hysteria. So I think Roswell was kind of like the first big thing for the military to go, okay, this from now on, it's going to be weather balloons and it's going to be ball lightning and that's our story. We're going to stick to this. And to me, when you're researching stuff like this, I always go to we know what the military said. We know that they sat there with the weather balloon and they took pictures but talk to the people, the other eyewitnesses. And this is where I go. If you're going to research something, talk to the people that actually saw the dead alien bodies or saw the actual craft. Or I forgot her name, but it was the little girl. She was very young at that time. They had a piece of the metal from one of the crafts, I think, and she was playing with it in the sheriff's office. So talk to people like that who have nothing to hide, who are, aren't the military, aren't the government, and they know what they saw. They're, that they were right there on the ground. They saw it. And you listen to those people. Listen, it's like basic psychology says, listen to the people that have nothing to hide. They're going to share their stories and be like, yeah, this is what I saw. Here you go. And, they're not going to sit there and lie to you. Why would they do that? So don't trust the government. Don't trust their stories. Listen to the people that actually have nothing to hide. They were right there. They saw everything. And I go off of that, when it comes to things like this.
Absolutely. And, kind of getting off the government thing for a bit, even though I love the MIB thing, this is sort of along those lines. What are your thoughts of some of these other entities that we find that are quite popular, paranormal entities such as the Hatman? Have you come across that in your research, and what are your thoughts on that?
This is the thing. I don't really know. I don't really know about this. Is it demonic? Is it another kind of entity? Like I said, I grew up in later on in sort of a more Christian-y household where everything was God or the devil. That's it. And if there was something evil, then it was a demon. But there are, I think, other entities out there. What is Slender Man? Is it a tulpa? You know what I mean? Is it something that people have imagined? Is it a demon just taking a different form? Is it, an entity that's just unique unto itself? These sorts of things are really hard to explain because, again, these, the sort of interdimensional world that we live in, we have to start kind of telling ourselves, okay, we're not the only ones here, and I was talking to a friend the other day about, how, like, neurodivergent people are kind of wired to see through these sort of veils and, more than most people. And so, I don't know. I mean, are these entities tulpas? Again, are they just unique entities? I think we're going to be talking about this for many years to come because I don't think we're really going to ever understand the paranormal like we want. Look at our ancestors. Look at the ancient Celtic people. You know what I mean? They were dealing with the paranormal and they were trying to figure it out and put names to what they saw. And we're doing the same thing in this age. You know what I mean? Nothing's really changed. We're human beings living this experience. And when something comes through those dimensions or through that thin veil, we're sitting there like, what? And we're trying to come up with a name to this thing. And I think we're just no different than our ancestors. We're going to be forever wondering, questioning, talking, mulling it over, trying to figure it out. Again, I just don't know what these things are. I mean, they have an evil presence to them, a lot of them, and someone would immediately go, oh, demon, and I'm trying to kind of break myself out of that. What if it isn't a demon? What if there are just evil entities, like the one that tormented me all those years? Mm-hmm. It didn't feel demonic, because demons have a certain energy signature. I've been like, I've had a person who called my mother and I. We used to do these sorts of things, cleansings and things like that. And, you could feel the evil from the street. If it's in a house or building, you could feel it from the street. It's there, and it's a demon. It's just unmistakable. But some of these entities aren't demons, and they are so very evil. They just have a different energy signature. So that's how I kind of know that they're different. But again, what are they exactly? I don't know. What spawns them? Where do they come from? Or were they summoned? Or did they just exist? Are they just, are evil, beings just evil beings? I don't know. It's one of those like mysteries that the paranormal folks like you and me and everyone else, we're going to be discussing this for years and years to come. I don't think we're ever really going to figure it out.
I agree. And I think that, these paranormal entities are called tons of different things. And the semantics is where everybody's getting messed up and mixed up. And now you've had demonologists on your show. And what kind of a job is that? Can you tell us a little bit about any experiences you've had talking to demonologists and specialists that are in that area?
I don't know a whole lot about it, even though I was in the Christianese sort of, fundamentalist Christian, world for a while. From what I've seen, the demonologists usually have a religious background. They usually were studying theology. They were going to seminary or something, and they're usually, Christians or Catholics, and they tend to apparently there's different ranks of demons. There's different categories, and they all have names. And you got to think about it, too. I mean, if demons, like in the Bible, if they're truly fallen angels, they did have names, they did have ranks, because that's what angels have. So they have the same abilities and the same power for the most part as angels. They can shapeshift, they can do different things. I grew up reading a lot of good stories about angels. And how, these people had full of miracle stories about, people who were, say, driving along and their car broke down, and they, all of a sudden this person came out of nowhere and fixed the car, and then they turn around and that person is like totally gone. There's no way they could have walked away. So, I mean, stuff like that, these sort of miracle encounters. But then you read other stories where all of a sudden a person turns around and there's a creepy dude who, is clearly not human. You know what I mean? But he looks human, but he's not human. And so I think that it goes both ways. I think you can have good experiences with angels and bad experiences with demons because they have the same kind of power. But as far as demonologists, I don't know much about that, and I don't really want to get into it because to me, a demon is a demon is a demon is a demon. And I've had plenty of experiences with them. I've had experiences with really tough ones that were hard to get rid of, that were hard to send away. They were either in a person or they were in a home or on an actual plot of land. It is sort of like I had an encounter one time. It was very silly, but it was a demonic thing, but it was, I don't know, it just acted like it didn't really know what it was doing. And one night I had gotten pretty spiritually strong at this point, and I was, not afraid of much. And I was just about to get into bed, and I saw this entity that it was either three demons or it was a three-headed demon. It was something, but it had three heads, and I could barely kind of see it, but I could see it just enough. And it just kind of came through, and it was trying to scare me. And it was like, ooh, we're going to stay here and watch you all night sleeping. And isn't that scary? And I was so unfazed at this point because I had seen so much and been through so much. I was just like, whatever. And I got into bed and I pulled the covers up and I, up to my neck, and I went to sleep and I slept really great. But I knew those demons were going to go downstairs because I saw them. They were like completely disappointed. I saw them go, darn. And they went downstairs, and I knew they were going to try to bother my mom. And of course, my mom, being one of the most spiritually formidable people I've ever met, she was not going to put up with it either. So sure enough, in the morning, I walked downstairs and my mom, she was just like, you're not going to believe what happened last night. And I said, oh, I bet I will. And so she told me, she said, there was this three-headed demon, or maybe a three-headed, or maybe it was three of them. I don't know. But they came from upstairs, and they came down here and tried to bother me. And I told them to get lost. And I started laughing at her, and she was completely confused. And I said, I had the same encounter. I said, they were upstairs bothering me, and I told them to get lost. And they came down here, and I knew they would bother you. And you would tell them to get lost, and I was going to have the story in the morning. I just knew. I saw the whole thing play out. So, again, these were demons, but they were newbies of some kind. They weren't scary at all. It was just this ridiculous thing, and it was just like they tried, and we sent them away. So I've dealt with all kinds of demons, I guess, from different ranks or what have you. But again, I don't really understand the whole demonologist world. I just know that a lot of the ones that I've met are all, they all have like a religious background.
Yeah, and it's pretty cool that you were able to expel them and do all that, but I agree. These there's hierarchies of these things, and the people who study them have delineated the hierarchies. And I mean, this goes way back throughout history. And there is, I am fascinated by the fact that they all have names as well. I think that's just absolutely crazy. And it kind of speaking about the demonic stuff and some more recent topics, what are your thoughts about this recent, I'm on the fence about this recent Travis Scott concert. Do you think this was some real ritualistic symbology, or what is your opinion of that?
I haven't really read much into it. I've only, just kind of, reading some of this stuff and just heartbroken for the victims. I mean,
Right.
my God, I think a lot of it was poor planning, really. And they were
For
warned.
sure.
And, again, I'm not really sure, because I have been in a situation, or several situations, where I have seen, say there was a waiting room and at the DMV or something like that, where somebody who clearly had something on him, some kind of demon, some kind of something, some kind of nasty spirit of some kind, came into the room, and whatever was on them jumped on other people and kind of had an effect on everybody. So I believe that something like that could happen. I've seen how one person's sort of creepy demonic, presence, whatever's on them, can jump off of them and jump onto other people and affect them and get them angry or agitated or aggressive. So maybe there was something like that involved. But I need to talk to you more about that, because I actually haven't heard that theory. I just heard from like the, sort of the really unfortunate victim standpoint. A lot of the people were trying to flag for help and they weren't getting it. So,
Right. Yeah. And I mean, this goes, every culture has some sort of experience or lore going back to the Romans, the Pharaohs, the Canaanites. I mean, every tribe in North America, and like you said, Central America, and most cultures, even the Norse cultures and European cultures, it seems like everybody has at least some experience or varying opinions of what some of these entities might be. And before we go and wrap up here, let me make sure and have you tell our listeners where they can keep up with your podcast, what you have going on, etc.
Right now, I just have the podcast on YouTube. We're going to put it on Spotify and whatnot at some point, but it's just the Boogeyman Chronicles. You just type it in, go to YouTube and just type it in. You can find it there. I wrote a book called the Boogeyman Chronicles. I am not officially allowed to promote it until January 1st, but yeah, I have a book out detailing all of my encounters, and that's pretty much it. It's just the YouTube page. So
that's awesome. Awesome stuff. And I can't thank you enough for coming on the show. I know you've been busy and having a lot going on, and I just can't, I can say that it's made my week to talk to you. So I'm very excited to hopefully have you back on the podcast again and talk soon.
Yeah, absolutely. absolutely. Anytime, just let me know.
Very, very cool talking with MG Stevens. There you have it. She is definitely one of the best people I like talking to about these sorts of things, because maybe it's because we have such similar experiences and possibly ideas about some of the paranormal activity taking place, whether that be unidentified aerial phenomena near government facilities or Native American lands, or whether that be just things that go bump in the night. The Boogeyman Chronicles is a really cool podcast. I highly recommend you check it out. And, I think her neurodivergent and empath ability together make it very interesting. And she's a very apt researcher in getting to the bottom of some of these things and not having the fear factor involved. She's got the guts to call it what it is and say what it is she thinks is going on, whether that be government disinformation or strange entities roaming badlands and paranormally active landscapes near portal areas. She's on point. And just about every culture has a form of it. I love her take on tricksters and paranormal entities, and the stories she told about her own experiences are just mind-blowing. Can't wait to have her back, especially to discuss this new book of hers coming out, and I think that would be a real treat. Thank you so much for everyone listening in, and until next time, keep your eyes to the skies, feet on the ground, but don't forget to take a look around.
Come blast off in my time machine. Third eye feeling like an Visine. Blast off, blast off, blast off, blast off. Come blast off in my time machine. Third eye feeling like an Visine. Blast off, blast off, blast off.